welcome back to Unparliamentary with Lisa Gretzky. I'm Lisa Gretzky, the NDP MPP for Windsor West, and today I'm joined by Tracey Ramsey, who is the NDP MP for Essex. The topics we're going to cover this week is the new federal leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, a former colleague of mine, and now the leader of Tracey's team. We're also going to talk about Pharmacare, and Tracey's going to talk about NAFTA. She'll explain what her role is within the federal NDP party, and then discuss what's going on with NAFTA. So before I get started, I wanted to mention, as I always do, that you can follow me on social media. I encourage it because there's a lot more information shared on my social media than I'm able to cover in a podcast. So my Twitter account is @LGretzky. Or you can go to my Facebook and look up Lisa Gretzky. Make sure you go to my page and like my page because I do have a personal profile as well. And then on Instagram, you can follow me under Lisa Gretzky as well. So we'll jump right into this week's topics. We're going to start with Jagmeet Singh. Mm-hmm. So as many people out there probably know, Jagmeet Singh was the MPP for Bramley-Gore-Malton, and he was a colleague of mine, a fellow caucus member. In fact, his office is right next to mine in Queen's Park. Jagmeet has recently won the leadership race to be the leader of the federal New Democrats. Mm-hmm. So he is now part of Tracey's team. So I'm just going to have Tracey kind of give you an update on what it's like having Jagmeet at the federal level now.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say hello to everyone, and thank you to Lisa for inviting me here today. It's an exciting opportunity to talk about some of the things that are happening at the federal level. And of course, we have Jagmeet in common, and we're quite thrilled to have him on. And he's brought so much excitement and energy to Ottawa. I can tell you that I've been with him on many occasions where he can barely even walk across opposition lobbies without being stopped for pictures. People are excited. They're asking him about the race and his success, the success that he had, signing up the amount of members that he had and the money that he raised is quite something and well beyond what we've seen in other parties. So he's generating that wonderful excitement. And of course, for us, he is traveling across the country right now. He's actually in Vancouver right now. He was out at a safe injection site yesterday, learning how to inject naloxone. And, you know, a lot of folks during the race really talked about the fact that he doesn't hold a seat as a member of Parliament. And, you know, did we think that would be a detriment? How did we feel about that? And for me, I really always felt that it was positive because it's like we've gained a member of caucus, right. And someone who's not tied to the House in the traditional way. So he's going to be off around the country, raising money, connecting with people, talking about the party, and just kind of generating that excitement heading into 2019. So we kind of have the best of both worlds. So he's in Ottawa every week. We get to spend time with him. We know what he's up to, you know, talking about all the different people that he's meeting across the country. And of course, you know, updating him on everything that's happening in the House. He really has, you know, a lot on his plate, making sure that he's balancing Ottawa and the rest of the country. The rest of the MPs, of course, we're always balancing our riding in Ottawa. But you know, he's doing a fantastic job. We couldn't be happier. There's a renewed energy in our caucus and a lot of excitement. So we're quite happy to have him. And we know that he went and basically signed off on his member of provincial parliament seat with Andrea. And so that's now official and moved on. And from what I understand, he had a bit of an emotional time with the caucus.
Yes.
You know, yeah. And so we've had similar welcoming kind of emotional moments with the caucus in Ottawa. So it's been wonderful, and we're really excited to see where we're going to go in the next few months. We have a federal convention coming up in February, and so he really is traveling nonstop between now and then. And, you know, I think we'll try to touch all corners of the country. Yeah.
And I'm personally excited that Jagmeet has become the federal leader. I mean, I know what a genuine, because he was a member of our caucus, I know what a genuine human being that Jagmeet is. But aside from that, I'm excited because he's from our area.
Yes.
And I know that he has talked about his experience growing up here in Windsor, but he's also talked about so many good things about our area. And we touch base and talk about Windsor. He asked what's going on here.
Yeah, he has a great love for Windsor, and that comes across. And if you meet his parents, it's the exact same thing. Like his dad, really speaks so highly of his experience here and the people that he worked with. And, he held quite a significant role at the hospital, so he knows a lot of people in the medical community here. And, I do think that there was a bit of pushback on Jagmeet's experience as, a young person of color in Windsor. But we have a super multicultural area, and sometimes that's the experience of people of color. It doesn't mean that our entire region is not good. I think it's quite the opposite. It shows how diverse we are and really how far we've come. To think now that the City of Windsor has a diversity officer that's dedicated.
Yes.
To see the work. I was at the Amherstburg Freedom Museum last week, with a young Black student group of 150 from our region. So we really do have a special area down here, and he does have a great love for Windsor. So he's coming down soon. Of course, we have Brian Massey's 15-year anniversary gala. We're all quite excited for that. Brian is the dean of our caucus, and so Jagmeet will be coming down and joining us for that wonderful festivity, and of course spending a couple of days here in Windsor, Essex. And I'm really hoping to get him out on a farm in the county. My farmers are quite keen to get him out there, so I think that'd be a good experience.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So before we move on to the next topic, I'm wondering if you could share, because I did my social media tags.
Oh,
and
yes.
I know you're on
Yeah.
social media as
I
well.
am.
And people might want to learn more about what you're doing representing the people of Essex. And often you're not just representing the people of your riding, you're actually representing the people of my riding and the riding of Windsor-Tecumseh as well.
Definitely. When it comes to my portfolio of international trade, I would say that, there are things there that you might not find on some other MPs' pages, because that's a lot of the focus of the work that I do. So that's true. So you can find me on Facebook. Tracey Ramsey, MP Essex is my page. Please follow along there for updates. And I have my website, which is traceyramsey.ndp.ca. You can find all of the work that I'm doing there. I have Instagram, Tracey Ramsey MP, and of course Twitter, which is my favorite currently, and I just am obsessed with Twitter. So it's at Tracey Ram, and you can find me and follow along with the work that I'm doing and what the federal NDP is up to.
Yeah. And I highly recommend that you go on Tracey's social media, like every page that you possibly can, because there is so much information that gets put up on Tracey's social media that you may not read about in our local newspaper or see on our local news. And certainly we won't have time to talk about everything you do, because you're very busy. Tracey covers a lot of ground. So I definitely suggest you get on Tracey's social media and follow her, because it's really interesting to see what's going on, not just in Ottawa in the House of Commons, but to see what Tracey's doing as part of her credit portfolio as she's traveling our country and other countries.
Other countries,
discussing our trade agreements. So I wanted to move on to talk about Pharmacare, because at the provincial level, we had made an announcement. The provincial NDP had made an announcement about Pharmacare at our last convention. So we had announced that as a government, we would bring in universal Pharmacare, meaning that everybody in this province would have coverage for the prescription medications that they need. And then I think it was in a matter of 2 days, the Liberal government scrambled to try and get an announcement put together themselves to possibly try and take the conversation around away from the announcement that we made and get the attention back on them, because we are going into an election. So, of course, that's what they're trying to do. Unfortunately, the Liberal government, the provincial Liberals, in their announcement around Pharmacare, their Pharmacare plan will actually only cover anyone 24 and under. So it will not touch or help anybody over the age of 24, which we see as a huge gap. We have so many people in our province and in our country who are low income, who are struggling to make ends meet, who often go to the doctor and get a prescription and then can't get it filled because they can't afford to, and that just kind of exacerbates their health issues. So we were pushing the Liberal government, the provincial Liberals, to do the right thing and expand that program, but they're going to stick with the 24 and under. And interestingly enough, when they announced it, they put it in the budget, except for they just made a one-line announcement they were going to do it, and there was no money dedicated in the budget for it. So we're still waiting to see exactly how that's going to roll out and what the cost of their plan really is. But I know at the federal level, the NDP have also been pushing for universal Pharmacare. So maybe you can talk about what that call looks like as far as the federal NDP's call for Pharmacare, and maybe some of the discussions between the other two parties, the governing Liberals and the Conservatives, when it comes to that call for Pharmacare.
I mean, we are the party of Medicare in Canada. People know Tommy Douglas, one of the greatest Canadians who brought in Medicare, and across our country, every Canadian now benefits from that system. And right now, of course, we're watching, what's happening in the U.S. and seeing the differences, which we know quite well down here on the border, but a lot of other Canadians don't know how expensive some of the healthcare actually is. So we have healthcare. That's a fantastic thing to have in our country, but we are the only OECD country that has a Medicare plan without Pharmacare attached to it. And it was always the vision of the NDP to add Pharmacare, because we know that a person's health, doesn't stop with that visit to the doctor. And we hear many, many cases in our offices about people who, leave the hospital and then are unable to afford the medication that they need in order to become better and to become well. So it's a really serious gap that is costing our healthcare system a lot of money. And at the provincial level, yes, we see it coming in for youth, but it's an odd formula, because to implement the program itself is quite extensive. It's a big undertaking. So why not undertake it for everyone at the same time? Why kind of have this system where only certain people will get it initially and roll it out? Because the savings are there for everyone. And whether you're looking at, one demographic or another, there are so many common drugs that Canadians are taking across the board that we could be saving an incredible amount of money on. And so at the federal level recently, we have been having a study happen at the Health Committee with Don Davies, who is our health critic for the federal NDP. And this study really brought to bear the fact that we would save a lot of money to have a Pharmacare program in Canada. Yes, employers would, provinces would, I would say community partners that we have that help in those gaps that exist when people can't afford their medication. We would be able to actually save millions and millions of dollars in Canada per year if we had a national Pharmacare program. So when that news came out, that came from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, so who's an independent officer of the Parliament, who did this report, who said, actually, you will save money. So at that point, federally, we introduced a motion in the House of Commons. We used one of our opposition motion days to bring in implementing meetings with the provinces within a year to start the conversation of a national Pharmacare program. So we had a great debate in the House of Commons, and curiously, the Liberals spoke about Pharmacare and the importance of Pharmacare, but then voted against our motion. So the Conservatives, really believe that privatization is the way to go. They really don't support any type of universal program that would cost everyone in the same way. There's often the word socialist thrown around in the House of Commons.
Like a dirty word.
Yeah, so it's not something that's necessarily supported, although I think you would find individuals who maybe feel otherwise, because at the end of the day, all of us are representing people. And we know that in our 6 offices down here, we have a great number of people, largely, seniors, but also people with young children who are struggling under the cost of drugs and cannot afford to take them. I have stood at many people's doorways and they're telling me it's either I buy my prescription medication or I put food in my fridge. Or I try to keep my heat on, which is near impossible with our hydro costs and everything going on. So these are the choices that people are making. And these are not choices that are beneficial to our entire society. It's harmful. And it's really difficult for our frontline workers, too, because our frontline workers see this because they see people that are repeating their visits to them because they simply can't get well. You have husbands and wives who are sharing medication, taking lower doses, skipping doses, and all of these things end up with people who are not well and back in the system and not able to stay at home and focus on the rest of their life versus struggling with their health so badly because of a lack of medication. So at the federal level, we are pushing very hard. And I was pleased to see our local Labour Council, and I think across Canada, all the Labour Councils at Labor Day this year adopt the Pharmacare. and bring that forward and really push for that. We had great support from the unions, from the nurses, from Doctors for Medicare. Across the country, we had really great support for our motion. Unfortunately, it was defeated in the House of Commons.
Yep. And I think that's what we find at the provincial level too, is initially it sounds like the government is supportive and going in the right direction, and then they find an excuse not to support it. And I think it's interesting to point out that provincially, the provincial Liberals will say they believe it's the responsibility of the federal government to bring in a program like this. And yet the federal government is saying, well, we're not really interested in that. And I also think it's interesting to point out the conservative perspective of not wanting everybody to have to pay for somebody else's services, right?
Yep.
But if you look at, when you really get down to it, you think we all already pay for healthcare services. And if people are able to take the medications that they're supposed to be taking, when they're supposed to be taking them, and in the dose they're supposed to be taking them, that would actually help relieve some of the pressure when it comes to our healthcare system. And we actually would see some relief and some savings within our hospital system or in people ending up in the doctors. If you can't take the medications you're prescribed, your health deteriorates further.
It does.
And that means more visits to the doctor or more hospital visits, which are more costly than if you were able to take your prescription in the first place. And the other thing with the Pharmacare plan is that you have more buying power and more bargaining power.
Absolutely.
So you're buying larger quantities of prescription drugs, which in essence is helping to save money on those prescription drugs.
I mean, you talk about things like statins, cholesterol medications, you talk about blood pressure medications, diabetes medications. There are millions of Canadians that are taking these. So, of course, if we could bulk purchase that, it would drive down the price. And that bears out across the world wherever anyone has a Medicare plan. There's another aspect to this, too, and it really is about employers. So whether you're a large corporation or a small business, which is what we mostly are in this region, small businesses, employers are paying for secondary health benefits that are quite costly. And so if they didn't have to pay for prescription medications because they were covered by a plan within our country, that would save them money. That would help them in their bottom line. Plus, it would help with their employees being healthier. So how many employees are having to miss work because they simply can't afford their medication? So, this would help all around. And we know already that our healthcare system attracts investment from the U.S., certainly from countries around the world, because it is a lower cost for employers knowing that we're all covered. So the same would be true of Pharmacare. So, it would be attractive for any type of investment or new facilities that would employ people here. It would be something I think that would be a great benefit because they would know we don't have to worry about people's healthcare. We don't have to worry about people's Pharmacare because they have plans for this in Canada. And we also have a province that's doing this, right? So we have Quebec, who's doing this quite well. And so we have our own model within the country that's working well for people and keeping people healthier. So we really don't have to look that far from home. But it really is a failure of our system to not have Pharmacare. And there's a whole other piece to this. So why don't we have Pharmacare? And my belief is really that we have a huge pharmaceutical lobby that exists in Canada. Pharmaceutical corporations make an incredible amount of money, as they should. They're, basically providing life-saving or life-extending medication for not just Canadians, but across the globe, which is a really important thing to do. But years ago, in the 90s, there was an agreement that was made, and it was struck with the pharmaceutical companies and the government. And it was to say that if you're going to produce name brand pharmaceuticals, which are more expensive, we all know, than generic, then you need to have a research and development footprint here in Canada. Mm-hmm. You need to be supporting all of our scientists. You need to be innovating here, and that will create, a good balance in what we have in our country. And so for a time, we did see the big pharmaceutical giants start to increase their R&D in Canada for that 2-year extension on patent that they got at the time. But now we've fallen off a cliff on that. We're back down to all-time lows of near 4% of R&D in Canada. So, the big pharmaceutical companies really are making a lot of money off of these medications. And the patent system gets very tricky. So think of something like an EpiPen. An EpiPen is still considered a name brand pharmaceutical. So you're paying the highest price possible. It is not a generic brand. Now, it's not the medication, epinephrine, that's in an EpiPen. It's the pen itself. So every few years, they change that pen mechanism and repatent. So that drug stays at the highest cost. That never goes to a generic market. So not even every drug in Canada is available generically. And sometimes because of the delivery system, not because of the medication itself. So there are a lot of flaws that the pharmaceutical company keeps going because that profit keeps coming to them. So this is somewhat of a threat to them because it would drive down the costs. But this is about the benefits for all Canadians, and this far outweighs, the money that the pharmaceutical industry is trying to get out of Canada.
Oh, absolutely. You would think that the governments, both federally and provincially, would recognize that this is absolutely necessary for the people of Ontario and the people of Canada to bring in a Pharmacare program to make sure that everybody has access to the medications that they need so that they can take them as needed.
And I want to just tie in trade because that's my world. I'm always talking about international trade. And what we've seen recently in trade agreements, starting with CETA, which is the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement with the European Union, and continuing on with TPP, which is still quite alive, even though most people think it's gone. They're actually negotiating it right now. They really started to look at healthcare. They started to look at intellectual property, which is the patents that exist around the drugs, and extending those patents. So in CETA, there's an extension of the patents, which means that drugs will cost Canadians more for a longer period of time. So it's going to take even longer for newer drugs to get to the generic market. So right there, is a direct impact from a trade agreement, which most people think wouldn't impact our access to drugs here at home, but it does. And so these things are really starting to cross over into globalization, into that international market. And if we don't have something like Pharmacare to ensure that Canadians can afford their medication, we're going to become quite vulnerable to now foreign corporations coming in and trying to get access to the market of pharmaceuticals in Canada.
And I just on past Sunday had the pleasure of seeing Senator Bernie Sanders.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
Speak about.
I watched from home. Yeah,
speak about
it was incredible.
Bringing our healthcare model to the United States. And one of the things that he pointed out, and I think the majority of the people in the crowd were shocked by this, is he said that the U.S. has incredibly high costs when it comes to medications. But he said, you think Canada is doing better and you're not.
No.
And I think a lot of people in the room were shocked to know that we were our cost for medication is quite high. And so it's not, to you and I, maybe that's not a surprise because we hear from constituents all the time that are struggling to make ends meet and be able to take their medication. But I think a lot of people in the province and in the country don't realize just how much, what a monopoly some of these companies have in pharmaceuticals and how much that's costing rather than benefiting the people in the country.
It's so true. It's so true. And this one family sticks out in my mind from running in the campaign. They lived in Amherstburg and he had been newly retired, had a good job, had a good benefit package, thought they were kind of set for life. And he became quite ill. He had a rare form of cancer and needed treatment. And so even though he had a great benefit package, his retirement benefit package had a limit, a lifetime limit on the amount that he could use. And it was, $75,000 upwards of that, which sounds like an incredible amount of money for medication over your lifetime. But if you need something experimental, if you need something, that is maybe kind of cutting edge or just coming out of the market, that money was gone already for him. And thankfully, he was on the path to health. It had been successful, but now they were faced with their retirement with no more money out of a plan that they thought was quite fantastic, a really good job. So I think there's also this illusion that if you have some type of plan that you're going to be okay. But the other thing that we've seen is, we've had some very difficult times here in Windsor-Essex since the 2008 downturn in the market. And so a lot of the contracts with the unions that are being bargained, these things are slipping away and rolling back slowly and slowly. So there is, less coverage for Pharmacare. I remember, at Ford, you would pay 35 cents for a prescription.
Yep.
Now you pay, you pay $90, the first $90 every, quarter, which is still fantastic and very, very good plan to have. But even people who in the past thought, yes, I have fantastic healthcare benefits, I'm going to be okay, that situation is shifting too. So that coverage isn't there in the way that it used to be either.
Yeah. And many of those employers, my husband's at Chrysler, so many of those employers are actually shifting towards, in their collective agreements for benefits, they're actually shifting towards generic because they recognize that that's less expensive for them to be providing those benefits.
Imagine how much less expensive it would be if we had Pharmacare.
Yes.
It would even be more so. For them, it really is a win. And I wish that the employers would get on board more, the large and small employers, and talk about the benefits to their businesses and the way that they think it could help to keep their employees healthy, which is something that they all want as well, because that keeps their businesses running and doing well. So, it's kind of win-win-win all the way around.
Yeah. Well, I know that we'll keep pushing for it.
Yes. We won't stop. We won't stop at the federal level.
And I know at the federal level.
It's a key platform piece, and we'll just continue to be. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that there is some hope out there that the federal Liberals will do something, but I really get discouraged when I see it becoming a political maneuver versus something to help people. I think that the vote that we just had was symbolic of that it was something that if you looked at on paper and didn't know the party that introduced it, you would support. And there was the public support. It just became political, which is unfortunate, because then that keeps, people without Pharmacare in Canada.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to use that as a segue to go to the next segment, because you were talking about trade, and so this is a big topic, and you are definitely more educated in this than I am. You've spent a lot of time on it, so I want to talk about NAFTA and what that means specifically for the people of our region, and then what it means for a country as a whole. Mm-hmm.
Well, it started when Donald Trump was elected, and we certainly heard him talking about it in that period of time when he was running, that he thought NAFTA was horrible, and he did talk about NAFTA in a negative way. So it wasn't too long into his presidency when we saw this procedure being triggered in the States. They have what they call the Trade Promotion Authority, and this is really a process that they go through when they're looking at any type of trade agreement. So here we are in this renegotiation of NAFTA, something, by the way, that has never been done before. So even our own trade negotiators from Ottawa, from Global Affairs, have never experienced a renegotiation of a deal. And 23 years on from NAFTA, you're not going to have to look far in Windsor-Essex to find someone who thinks that this deal has cost us a lot of jobs, has cost us, a great deal of employers. I mean, you look at GM. GM is completely gone from our region. Yeah. So we certainly have felt the impact of NAFTA and know that this deal needs to be fixed, that it's broken. The things that people talked about 23 years ago, so they talked about the labor chapter being a side letter basically to the agreement, and the environment chapter being a side letter, and how that wasn't good enough, that we needed something stronger. And that's exactly what's come to pass. Everything that was predicted. So 400,000 manufacturing jobs have left Canada under NAFTA. The textile industry has been wiped out. It no longer exists. So, we really have lost. And it's curious to me because when I'm in Ottawa, now I'll tell you that the Liberals are unabashed free traders. I would say they are actually stronger free trade proponents than the Conservatives. They're willing to go where the Conservatives will not. And one prime example of that is China. So we're looking at the Chinese deal right now. And even Harper, even the Conservatives would not enter into an agreement with China. And so here we have the Liberals who, have never met a trade deal they didn't like and have adopted essentially under CETA and under TPP previous Conservative negotiated deals that now they're saying are the gold standard. There's not much difference. I would say that there are the Liberals and the Conservatives in one side of trade, and then there's the NDP. And the NDP is hugely pro-trade. coming from this region and being previously an auto worker, I understand very well the importance of trade. I know that a vehicle crosses that border 7 times. We have integrated chains, the importance of that, the access of the border and you're riding, being able to get across that. This is the largest border crossing that we have in North America. So it's not a question of whether or not you think that trade is good. It's about what was included in NAFTA and the issues that we have with essentially Mexico, with the low-waged economy that they have there, lack of labor laws, lack of respect for their environment, and what we see in the U.S. with the rise of right-to-work states. So for working people, NAFTA has been very tough in Canada, and you will not hear that from Liberals or Conservatives. I have to be honest that they only ever want to show, the wonderful side of NAFTA and talk about the importance of NAFTA. But there are things that need to be fixed in NAFTA. And so now we find ourselves in a situation where we've had several rounds of negotiations. And they started off with a really extremely tight timeline, which many people described as dangerous. Because when you're negotiating a deal or renegotiating a deal of this magnitude, you need time in between those negotiating rounds for our negotiating team to come back, talk to our stakeholders, talk to Canadians, talk to parliamentarians, and then kind of go back. That wasn't happening. They were so extremely tight. And in the first 3 rounds, we really didn't see much. There wasn't much happening. People who were at the tables were starting to question whether or not the U.S. was serious, which they didn't appear to be. Right. Nothing was really being put forward. There was very little movement until the 4th round. So we hit the 4th round, and up to this point, if you watch Donald Trump's Twitter feed, which I try not to do, but there was a lot of, things being lobbed at Canada about being an unfair trade partner, talking about our dairy, how we're cheating the system, right. Talking about wanting to keep Americans and American jobs and not have people from Canada in our jobs. And, there were a lot of things, even the wine sector was mentioned, like a lot of things that he was mentioning as though Canada has been a bad trading partner to the U.S. That's not the case. We have very balanced trade with the U.S. And so we really, 4th round comes and we start to see the really big items come out. We see the U.S. talk about supply management, which means our dairy farms, which surround us all here in Windsor, Essex, and certainly up in Chatham, Kent, Leamington. And they said that they want supply management gone within 10 years. They want 5% access to our market every year until that happens. And this to us is not acceptable. This will cost us our dairy farms. I have dairy farms out in the county that have been there, 150 years, more than 150 years. These are family farms that have been passed down. And that's not even talking about the quality of our milk or the way that our animals are treated or how, all of that works. So that came. And then, of course, they talked about auto and the rules of origin. But when we're looking at NAFTA, for us, the critical piece is how it will affect working people in Canada. Will it level the playing field with Mexico and the U.S. and the right-to-work states? Will it, allow our manufacturing sector to continue to thrive, or will we continue to see this tilt towards Mexico, where we're losing a lot of good-paying jobs in our community down here, for sure. And right now in this bubble of time, it really has created uncertainty at our border. And there are many reasons for that, of course, that Donald Trump has introduced. But for businesses who are thinking, okay, am I going to invest in my plant in Michigan or in Windsor? Right now there's a cooling period where they're waiting to see what's going to happen with NAFTA. So I'm concerned about our region and the impact that it will have. But I also believe that if we end up with nothing changed out of NAFTA, that's a great loss because it needs improvement. It needs things to be fixed in it. So if we end up, with nothing at the end of the day, the people who will lose again will be Canadians because the deal will just continue on. Now, if Donald Trump tries to rip it up in some way, he's going to have an extreme battle with Congress, and that we'll watch kind of play out, from here.
And probably on Twitter.
Yeah, on Twitter for sure at 3 a.m. But it's not just me who believes this. There are many economists, certainly from, the far left to the far right, who are saying that without NAFTA, we would still continue to trade. We would pay the tariffs because we have some of the lowest tariffs in the world between our countries, even without NAFTA, and that business would continue as usual. But I just think we're in this period of time right now where it's really difficult and concerning for people whose job depends on trade, people who've lost work to Mexico, people who have businesses that are looking at, how they can grow their businesses here. So right now we're just in this, terrible time of uncertainty. It's very unpredictable.
Yeah, we're in limbo.
We are.
And I know my colleague, John Van Toff, who's the MPP for Timiskaming Cochrane, was a dairy farmer.
Yeah.
And I believe he said it was a family business. So I know that he's watching how that plays out very closely, and I know he's watching what you're doing to keep up on.
Well, that's good.
Some of the issues
I'm
that
happy.
You're raising.
Yeah, I'm happy to have him keeping an eye. That's for sure.
It's a very very important topic that I think everybody should be keeping track of to see how it plays out, and not just watching Donald Trump's Twitter to see how it's going.
No.
Go to a reliable source.
Absolutely.
So I think we're gonna wrap up on that, but I'd like you to share your social media one more time, because you do share a lot on NAFTA and all kinds of things that are going on in the House of Commons and things that you're doing in your community that also benefit my community.
Yes.
So if you could share your social media.
So on Facebook, I'm at Tracey Ramsey MP Essex. At Twitter, I'm at Tracey Ram. And on Instagram, Tracey Ramsey MP. And if you go to my website, traceyramsey.ndp.ca, you'll see there's a nice handy trade link. And to the one side, you'll actually see a NAFTA little graphic that you can click on. And it will show you all of the work that I've been doing and that our party has been doing on every trade deal. So I'm happy to hear from people all the time on their opinion and what they think is important to them. And thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah.
You'll come back when we have some more NAFTA updates, and I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about.
Yes.
Comparing the two different levels of government and seeing what direction they're going. So again, I encourage you to follow me on my social media. So Twitter is at L Gretzky, Facebook is at Lisa Gretzky, and on Instagram it's Lisa Gretzky. Make sure you spell it with a Z, not an S. And make sure when you're on Facebook, you're looking for my Facebook page. Please go on and like the Facebook page, because there's a lot of stuff I share on there that you won't find on my personal Facebook. So I'm looking forward to doing the next podcast. I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to talk about yet. I think the last time I taped, I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. There's just so much that happens. And so I'm finding it a little difficult to pin down what I'm going to talk about next time. So you'll just have to tune back in to figure it out. Thank you.